Okay, we are ready to go on to our next speaker here. And let me start by introducing Arun Gupta. Arun has been in the venture world for a long, long time. And he's a partner at Columbia Capital. Before that, Arun was with Carlyle Venture Partners. And his focus is AI, cybersecurity, and a lot of emerging technologies. And most recently, in addition to being in the venture world, Arun has taken on sort of this new mission, and he is the CEO of NobleReach. And I'm going to let Arun tell you what that's about. And combining his mission work with his venture work, Arun has written a book, Venture Meets Mission. And we'll tell you how to get copies of his book that the Passaro Center will provide. Most importantly, Arun is an award-winning professor here at Georgetown. He teaches courses in entrepreneurship. Arun has degrees from Stanford and Harvard, and is just involved with us in many different ways. He has known Senator Warner since a long, long time, and is going to do, we have this pre-recorded talk with Senator Warner, and Arun is the moderator. I'm going to ask Arun to come up and just say a little bit about what he and, with the help of Senator Warner, what they're trying to do with NobleReach. Arun.
Thank you, Rena. Thank you, Rena. Wow, there's a lot of niceties, and it means a lot coming from Rena. I've known Rena for 40 years, so she's been a mentor, both a personal and a professional one for me. And I think that's what made this special. Of also, Senator Warner has been a professional mentor, having started my career at Columbia Capital, which is a firm that he started, and now collaborating with him on the policy and political side. So as Rena outlined, we wrote after teaching a class, we wrote a book called Venture Meets Mission. And the inspiration around that really came around trying to dovetail I think the two experience axes that I had, which is one being in the venture space, so being around entrepreneurs and the optimism that comes around entrepreneurs, but then also being on a college campus and teaching, and the optimism that comes around being these students. And what you started to notice is that what entrepreneurs have is knowing how to build a plane while they're flying it. And in a rapidly changing world that we're in right now, that's really what's required. It's hard to have 5, 10, 15-year plans because with emerging tech accelerating so much, geopolitical changes, societal changes, you need that entrepreneurial mindset. In addition, though, what you need is to get our best tech talent to come into government. And as we were writing the book, we came across a stat that less than 7% of tech workers in government are under the age of 30. We have 4 times as many tech workers over the age of 60. And the average age of Google is like 32, 33. And so this is a little bit red alert, because in great power competition, I think the theory we have is that you need to have better talent and better innovation around government. And so from the book, we were able to raise and start a foundation, which is called NobleReach. And NobleReach is embarking on taking that issue on. What we're doing is creating programs to kind of get tech workers, especially coming out of school, to go into government, think a Teach for America-like service, which restores a level of prestige, respect, but also having it be viewed as a career enhancer, so that they could go back to many of the financial services or consulting jobs if that's what they desired to do. And so, it was very apropos in this conversation that we had with Senator Warner, because as we talk about AI, and we talk about AI and the implications on financial markets, you can't talk about it without also talking about the talent we need inside of government to be able to address these issues. It's difficult to be setting policy. It's difficult to be incorporating it into day-to-day businesses when you don't have people that really understand it. And so how we rebuild that infrastructure to attract that talent in, we talk about that a bit. And Senator Warner talks about a little bit of what his biggest concern is for our country going forward, and part of that is generational apathy. We need this generation to be engaged. And that's what we're trying to do at NobleReach. And as you'll see, as we talk through the implications of AI, and financial markets. Towards the end of the interview, we talk a little bit about that as well with Senator Warner. So with that, we'll go to the interview.
Hello, everyone. This conference is being sponsored by Georgetown Vasarhelyi Center for Financial Markets and Policy.
Senator Warner, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Arun.
It's been great to be friends with you for 25 years. Watched you as a tech entrepreneur, a venture capitalist, and then governor, and now a senator. Your work's always been focused on bringing technology into policy and leading with the nation's tech hubs, and most recently with your work in chips. And it seems that we're in a new frontier with AI now. And you have a unique role as both being on the Select Committee of Intelligence, but also on the Senate Banking Committee. And so I think you have a unique perspective to share with the audience about the intersection of AI and our financial markets. And I think everyone would love to get your perspectives on what you're seeing out there and what concerns you.
Well, I appreciate that, Arun. Let me also echo, I'm very proud of our 25-year plus friendship, and proud of the work that you're doing as well. Before I get to AI and the financial markets, let me acknowledge at the front end that I can't think of a topic like AI where, candidly, the more time I spend trying to get educated, I'm not sure I actually feel like I'm always getting smarter.
Right.
There's no linear relationship, number one. And part of that because everything is happening so quickly. I think if we go way back in time to last November of 2022, the basic operating premise around at least large language models was who had the most data, who had the most GPUs, who could test that data in a way so that scale really meant something. And that from a national security standpoint in terms of competition with China, and it appeared that the OpenAI, Microsoft, or the Anthropic, Google, Amazon connections might kind of win the day. When Facebook released Llama into the wild, and you've started to see now models that say they don't have to rely on a large language model, some of the basic economic propositions around size, I think have been questioned. So let me acknowledge for everyone, I'm still learning and trying to get educated, number one. Number two, AI around the financial markets. One of the reasons why it poses such a problem is that many of the manipulation tools that AI can bring, not just deep fakes in terms of your image or voice or mine appearing in a way that's not true, but the ability to generate false consumer reports, to file false filings with the security agencies, the level of AI tools that could be brought to the table and at speed and scale are unprecedented. Much of the behavior, which is already illegal in terms of market manipulation, the reason why AI makes this potentially much, much more challenging is, again, the speed and scale which these tools can do that kind of manipulation. And candidly, Arun, I've been really surprised that the traditional financial markets, the big banks, the markets themselves, large corporates, that this is not higher on their level of concern.
As you lay out those risks, Senator, for the financial markets, what's the policy options that are available?
And that's where I'm surprised that I say this as a capitalist, that hardcore capitalists are not beating down my door saying we need to act here, because the ability to destroy public trust in the markets, we already know, and I'm sure we'll come to talk about this, AI could also, and has been destroying public trust in our elections, combined with certain political figures in our country. But the fact that this could happen in our markets at such a speed has been surprising to me. We've not heard more from our friends in the markets. In many cases, we are, at least some of the legislation I'm looking at, may not require a whole new set of laws, but it may require, because of the damage that can be done, a different level of damages. For example, we're looking at introducing the concept which already exists in the SEC of treble damages, because the damage that could be done is so extraordinary, number one. Number two, because this touches so many pieces of our financial sector, in my mind, another piece of legislation I'm looking at is really AI seems like it's almost tailor-made for FSOC. FSOC is an entity that came out of the 2008-2009 financial crisis. The idea of let's put the regulators all together that see above the individual crises by agency. But since AI has the potential to be so dramatic in terms of change, it would seem to be that FSOC should take this on and do it in a way where they have to act quickly. And we're looking at legislation there. And then finally, and this is more kind of less the specific law and more of how to approach this from a kind of a political process, the sausage making of trying to get laws made. And I say this again with some unfortunately learned humility as somebody who's had a dozen plus ideas about putting some guardrails around social media and almost all bipartisan legislation. And we've gotten nothing done.
Right.
We don't have privacy, we don't have data portability, we don't have interoperability, I thought low-hanging fruit. So as we think about how we might get some rules around AI in the financial markets, I do think combining the interest of those who are concerned about integrity in the financial markets, potentially with those who are concerned about integrity in our elections, might be that kind of political alliance to get particularly folks in my party, some of the Democrats who may not be necessarily that focused on markets, to say, hey, there's an alliance. Both of these institutions, both of these institutions, public trust is declining already, and AI could exacerbate that decline in public trust. So there ought to be an alliance here.
And do you see parallels to the problems on the election side that you're seeing on the financial market side?
Absolutely. The same level of use of deep fakes, the fact of the notion of whether you could have watermarking so people could understand whether there has been AI tools manipulating the message you're seeing, although if there's not commonality and there's not an ability to implement actually standards here, if there were a dozen different watermarking standards and consumers just don't get it, or it becomes like the fine print on as we get new apps and we all just go to agree, it won't be meaningful. And I've said this to folks who are concerned about the election piece. Having seen our inability to put some guardrails around social media manipulation without AI tools, and we've been so unsuccessful, I've been encouraged the small d Democrats to get with the big C capitalists and see if they can find some common ground, because I think the tools, you don't need even a next generation AI model to cause this kind of disruption. It could happen tomorrow. We're seeing it already in some of the political campaigning. I've been amazed actually that we've not seen more of this manipulation in our markets already.
So President Biden had the executive order on AI. It's being quarterbacked by Secretary Raimondo. Can you maybe highlight anything in the EO that you think helps address some of the issues that you're outlining?
Well, I think the EO has been, it's comprehensive. I think it is a good effort, and it has urged our financial regulatory agencies to look at this. But the problem with any EO, not just Biden's, but any presidential EO, it doesn't really have teeth. It doesn't have an enforcement mechanism. It's guidance. So again, in a bipartisan basis, I'm working with my friend Jerry Moran, Republican senator from Kansas, and we've put together a legislation introduced this week that would say, as NIST ends up creating some of these standards around AI, that at least in terms of federal government procurement, those NIST standards would become mandatory. So can we use the purchasing power of the federal government to bring some order to some of these AI tools that's not as strong as actually legislating at a level above federal government procurement, but at least it would be a first step.
Given the work that you've done on CHIPS and Science Act, of also trying to recreate jobs here in America to address some of our technical difficulties or technology difficulties, shortcomings, how are you balancing that with AI? Incentivizing the best for the consumer while also trying to create jobs here in the U.S.
And that's one of the things that I feel like there is this pushback from the tech community. And I came from the tech community. We both did. And what I often hear from my tech friends is, oh my gosh, we agree in principle that there ought to be some AI guardrails.
Yep.
But when words put on a page, we don't get them to agree. And then the immediate response is, well, and gosh, if we put too many regulatory hurdles, we'll slow down innovation. Now, that is at one level true, but at least so far, and if we take, again, social media, which bleeds into AI, and many of the tech companies that became the leaders in social media are now the leaders in AI, I don't think that potential threat should completely stop our process or progress. And I do think, in AI, with all the challenges, and we look at, again, China has made developments, but because they're not allowing the Chinese people to actually use the large language models, because they don't want to be they don't want exposure to things like Tiananmen Square in terms of asking their models, the vast majority of AI innovation is still going on in this country. Actually, the French have done a little. There were some of the people who worked at Llama. There was a group of French scientists, but we still dominate the innovation. So this idea that any rules of the road will drive the innovation abroad, I don't think that will come to pass. And you make the question about chips. I think chips is really important. But as you know, even when you put the subsidies out there, if you don't have the trained personnel, we've still got work to do there. I'm still trying to make sure, and I've worked with Secretary Raimondo closely on this, to make sure that the large companies that are looking for the money for the fabs don't take all of the $39 billion in one fell swoop. We've got to make sure there's a supply chain. We've got to make sure an ecosystem. We've got to make sure, for example, advanced packaging, that we ought to have part of that supply here in the United States. So none of this is easy. But I do think, again, if you step back, both directionally what we're doing at CHIPS is the right thing to do, from national security, from job creation, from innovation. I do think we've, again, got the lead in AI. And I just hope that we don't default to this is hard, and so we're not going to do anything. And I do fear, again, this is happening so quickly. 6 or 7 months ago, I could get dozens of senators to show up for anything that had AI around its title. I think you're already seeing senators kind of opt out, saying, gosh, this is too hard. Really? The number of people who show up, whether forums that I hold, smaller ones, bipartisan, or I give Senator Schumer and his partners, Senator Young and Senator Heinrich and Senator Rounds, credit, but there's been a huge fall off on members attending their education sessions already.
And in that context, is that an education gap, Senator?
I think it's an education gap. I think it's hard. I think there is a recognition that there is no simple answer here, and the initial thought of, well, should we create a AI-focused agency, might make sense 30, 40 years ago, right. But particularly with the House of Representatives right now, which is so anti-government focused, I think the reality of that happening becomes virtually impossible. So how do you create enough AI expertise in subject matter regulatory bodies, like the Securities and Exchange Commission, or the Federal Election Commission, or the National Transportation Safety Board? That becomes a conundrum. I do think we are going to need, and I think we could find this, and again, this I hopefully will get to some of the work you're doing. There are lots of folks who would love to come work with the government for mission's sake. And I think America got caught up in the Manhattan Project and Oppenheimer this summer. I think there's that same willingness to serve. So even if we don't create a AI-focused agency, the idea that smart people coming out of our schools would want to take on the mission of how we have a plus force that would of government workers that would help us with AI. We've got to make that sexy. We've got to make that, we're not going to be able to match salaries with Silicon Valley. But I do think, if we make the call, people will come.
Look, I picking up on that point, couldn't agree with you more. Just as you know, and you were a thought leader in it, we just finished our book, Venture Meets Mission. And in it, we talk about, the need to inspire this next generation. And I recall sitting with you at a conference and you being asked, having spoke about China and AI, about what's your biggest concern going forward. And your response there was generational apathy. And it really struck a chord with me, and I think it struck a chord with a lot of folks. And I think, could you share a little bit about your concern around that?
I am concerned that
ties
whether
into what we're trying to
people
do.
will step up, whether people will believe that government can still have a positive effect in their life. And I applaud so much what you're doing, the work you've done, teaching at Georgetown, teaching at Stanford, and the notion of how you get those bright young minds to not just think they ought to go into the venture business the way we did, or go work for tech startup here, and how we make it easy enough for them to have part of their government career. It doesn't mean they got to do it forever. And this notion of making it easy to move from the private sector to the public sector and vice versa is a great goal, especially when we need this talent for AI. I do think we've got lots of issues to wrestle with around security clearances and around the fact that if how you make sure that there's not appearance of bias when you go back to the private sector, but those are imminently solvable and fixable problems. And I do applaud what you're doing in your book. I do applaud what you're doing in terms of the nonprofit you've set up to try to make this a reality.
Yeah, at NobleReach now we have the foundation, we have a $500 million foundation to try to rebuild this infrastructure, and it's a talent infrastructure. And a talent infrastructure to take our top tech talent from universities and bring them into government service in a way that we're selling experiences. It doesn't need to be selling careers. As you're seeing the demand on the inside of government, what could we be doing from the outside to be helping place students into these agencies? Because I don't even think it needs to be all cleared individuals. There's so much more work to be done there.
Well, I do think we need a brand. We need something that if you've got that great graduate student at Georgetown, he or she needs to feel they're going to be part of something other than just going to work for the Department of Transportation. So how do you encase this experience, make it multi-year, but not, as you said, a whole career, give them some support so they feel like even if at the particular agency they may be the only computer scientist that's grappling with these issues, there is an ability for them to get together as a group. I think there have been past examples of this. We try, the digital services effort in President Obama was a good step. I think we need to make that much bigger around AI. And as somebody who's spent a lot of time working on, kind of in the weeds issues like security clearances, because one of the things we found, and not all of these positions need to be cleared, but when it takes a young person sometimes over 500 days, if they wanted to go join the CIA to get that initial clearance, we're chasing away talent, and that's going to become even more of a challenge as we try to recruit this talent into AI.
So on an optimistic tone, what can you talk about the positive of AI with financial markets?
It has huge opportunities. As we think about AI in terms of better honing some of the rote functions that we still perform and making people actually more productive. I think there's going to be an up and a downside on that. We're already seeing call centers in some cases being eliminated, offers enormous potential. Speeding the path of innovation is hugely important. I know some tech friends now who are working on AI tools that would help Ukrainians, frankly, use their drones more effectively to help break through the front lines against Russia. I mean, these tools have a huge upside, but I also think one of the things we need to be is techno-realist. I think for a long time we became such techno-optimists. First 15, 16 years of this century, and both political parties were part of that we did sometimes turn a blind eye that with every techno-optimism, with every social media positive, there was also a downside. And being techno-realist now is something that I think can embrace the optimism, but also put some guardrails in place so that we can at least be conscious of the possible downfall.
Well, Senator, on a personal level, on behalf of Georgetown and behalf of our audience, thank you for your leadership on these issues, on the Banking Committee, your leadership on AI, and please let us know how we can help.
Well, Arun, one of the most important things you can do is build out Noble House. Let's make that mission known across every campus in America, that there is at least part of your life can be done doing public service. And I think there are models. There's no matter how depressed I get, if anytime I get together with the folks who are the interns in my office here, they give me hope that at scale, for folks who've got knowledge in AI, helping in various spots in government for a part of their career, is a mission that I'm grateful for your leadership on, and we're going to get done.
Gratitude for your partnership.